Hey, look, everybody, welcome to today's call. See a couple of people dropping in now. We've got a nice bit of a nice cohort on the call today. Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Hamill. I'm delighted to be on this call, the Peering Podcast, a co-host today with the infatigable, I can't remember how you said it, the tireless Mike Richardson. And it's been a pleasure to meet Leo today, but I'm going to hand it over to Mike to give a proper introduction. I see some very familiar faces in the audience. So hi, Gordon. Hi, Andrew. Hi, Zarir. So look, nice to see some people there as well. We're going to hear today's discussion. Mike, look, over to you, and a big welcome to yourself and Leo.
Yeah, likewise. And hey, Zahir, or actually goes by the name Zed, makes it easier for everybody. Hey, Zed. Hey, Andrew, how are you? And nice to see you, Gordon, and others coming in. So great to be here. And this is the first of many to come episodes of the Peering Podcast. Leo knows better than anybody about this space. And apart from what Leo does, there are not too many organizations really podcasting in this space. So we decided to fill that void as a follow-on from the Fireside Chat webinar that we did a few weeks ago. Sophia will post in the chat here the link so you can get back to that, to be reminded where it is, to see future upcoming episodes, to be able to see the video of the recording of the Fireside Chat, and not least of all, to be able to read Leo's resume, because I am not going to read Leo's resume. I want to tell you a little bit about Leo instead. We have known each other for a decade and a half already. When Leo used to be on the senior C-suite staff at one of the other guys that we will name names of, Vistage.
Oh yeah, we have to name names.
Vistage, whose head office is just down the road here in San Diego, where I live in Southern California as well, as does Leo. And Vistage had the policy, of course, of putting its senior staff into local groups so that they could experience their product. And I was lucky enough, blessed, to have Leo in one of my key groups for probably, I think, 6 years or something like that, Leo. And I remember distinctly one time that Leo had just come back from a road trip tour around the USA doing some brand research. And I remember distinctly the day that he came into the group, so raised his hand and said, I need to share something with everybody, and said, hey, everybody, I've come to a conclusion that Vistage is trying to sell a Mercedes to people who do not understand the category of what a car is. He said, so we need to define the category. And he wrote the 2016 category defining book with Leo Bottary, with the then CEO of Vistage, who subsequently has moved on. And then Leo decided to actually go and sort of pursue this track and took the leap to do his own thing, has subsequently written 2 more books, the latest one of which you can see in his backdrop here of Zoom is called Peer Novation. And it's the whole idea of how do you take the power of peers inside organizations to really supercharge innovation, tapping into peer power. So, hey, Leo, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you here.
Well, it's great to be here, and thanks for that very generous introduction. Appreciate that.
So, Leo, look, you've been in this space for many, many years, as we talked about, and in the Fireside Chat a few weeks ago, we really said that the peer group category space, peer advisory boards, peer forums, whatever you call it, has really exploded over recent decades. And nobody has had a better ringside seat on that than you. So we'd love to hear from you. Where do you think the peer group category has come from? Where do you think it is now? And perhaps even more importantly, where do you think it's going?
So it's kind of interesting you mentioned that, because if you go back to when we first wrote the book, there's no question that people really, when they were being asked, when I was talking to CEOs and asking them about how you learn and grow and bring new ideas in your company, they would tell me things like, right, like I read books, I have a coach, I hire consultants, I go to events and conferences. Some said they went to executive development programs. They said nobody was mentioning being part of a peer group. And what's been interesting now, think about all the circumstances, all the things that have changed and essentially erupted in the world, where people are increasingly seeing that, why do I have to go this alone? This is crazy, to have to navigate a pandemic, to have to navigate a global economy that's doing all kinds of things, right? All these things. So they recognize that they are better together. There's no question about that. And it's not just about being lonely at the top. I think especially when you consider the pandemic, it isn't just about being alone in that position. It's about feeling a whole new level of isolation. Yeah. And I think when you have that, now you start thinking, okay, how can I reach out to people who know exactly what it's like to sit in my chair and have the responsibility, for example, of being a chief executive officer, so that we can talk to one another about how to navigate what's going forward. And I think we're going to continue to see, that trend basically out of need. I mean, just flat out, recognition that things are moving too quickly and it's too complex to try to be navigating all by ourselves.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? How many times do we hear phrases like, in a super connected world, people actually feel less connected. They feel more disconnected. They feel more isolated, as a leader, at least, a senior executive, a CEO, maybe in a larger corporate perhaps, or in a smaller entrepreneurial company or a mid-market company, a family business even. They feel more isolated, not less. What's that about, do you think?
Communication. You can be connected but not have clarity, right? I mean, think about it. Look at that study that came out earlier this year, just about U.S. companies alone losing $1.2 trillion annually because of ineffective communication. People are not intentional about it. We make assumptions. We do all kinds of things that keep us from really getting to the heart of what's going on. And one of the great things that being part of a group does is it kind of gives you those skills, that ability. You build muscles around being able to listen and ask good questions and do so without judgment, suspending assumptions, not jumping to conclusions, doing the kinds of things that allow for people to actually work together. So you can be connected, that's all well and good, but how you leverage that connection is a whole other ballgame. This is where I think group work is so powerful.
Yeah. Hey, Mark, you've been in the hallways of YPO for many, many, many years. You've been a member of Vistage yourself. What's popping for you right now as you listen to?
As I listen to Leo, my two questions come to mind, and I want to pull in kind of Andrew and Gordon and Philippe in a minute just for a couple of their comments and thoughts. Sure. I was going to ask two questions, Leo. One, what are CEOs looking to learn? What do you expect they're going to be looking to learn over the next kind of like 24, 36 months? And the second point is more on, there's such a variety of offerings out there. Like, Mike said, having been a member, current member, very engaged in YPO, being a member in Vistage, Ref, and we spoke about Chair earlier on. What are you seeing are the different types of member engagements, and who do you think is doing it well, and what seems to work better in terms of that stickiness, that connectivity? So they'd be the two questions just to drop in.
And you said chair, but you meant chief, right? We spoke about chief.
Sorry, I meant chief,
earlier along as we were getting started here. But hey, take it away, Leo.
Yeah, so a lot of CEOs just want to know how to be a good CEO. There's thousands of books about leadership. How many books are there out there? How many resources are there out there to talk to you about what being a CEO looks like? For many CEOs, they think it's that I'm the chief everything officer, right? So a lot of times these groups actually help you really understand what being a chief executive officer is all about, and how to grow your company, and how to kind of go through all of the things that, particularly when you've got people who are founding companies today and having to grow into that position. But even for experienced CEOs, they can learn a lot from others, particularly when they represent other industries. I think with regard to, who's doing this and what the value proposition is, I remember speaking for the National Association of Women Business Owners a while back, and being asked the question, well, okay, as a woman business owner, am I better off in a women specific group or in a mixed group? And so my answer was, why are we choosing? Because I do think there's two different value propositions there. There's certainly the shared challenge of being a woman business owner, and a lot of the resources, programs, things like that are available specifically to women business owners that they can talk with each other about and move forward with. By the same token, when I go to groups where there is a really good mix of men and women, they are probably the highest performing group. So if I were to be asked what kind of diversity actually may be most important, it's the mix of men and women in a group, I think is profoundly powerful.
I really like what Leo just said, Mark. Why are we choosing? If you remember back in the fireside chat, we talked about why do people have to make a false choice between this or that, when what we're focused on is giving them an and proposition where they can have the best of both worlds, this and that.
Yep.
Do you want to pull in a few comments?
Andrew, would you come in with some shared experience, some thoughts from your side?
Thanks very much. Hi, everyone. Just two things. I love the super connected world, but less connected as a leader. And you talked about communication. It is astonishing, given that I was trying to tot up the number of members in EO, REF.
I saw you scribble. I can see the brain working very hard there.
Vistage, Chief, and I was always crap at maths, so I can't do it. But the astonishing thing about this is, despite this explosion, there are many leaders. This is where the market starts. Who have not even heard of these organizations, which is more for the organizations for not putting them in, and more for these individuals for not trying to seek out this additional type of support.
You are so right, Andrew. We have barely scratched the surface of the ocean of CEOs and executives who really ought to be in a peer group. What do you think, Leo, in answer to Andrew's point?
It's the reason that the first book was written. To Andrew's point, I think it's even understated. The number of people in groups that could be in groups and who actually are is minuscule. I mean, it is absolutely minuscule. Anyone out there who thinks that, well, I don't know if I want to get into this because this market saturation is out of their minds. I mean, there's so much opportunity here if we can deliver, the value proposition that appeals, to folks in that way. And people don't do it for a lot of reasons. I often think about the fact that this is going to sound so. When you see
go for it, Leo. Don't hesitate. We're amongst friends here.
When you see really little kids and you see grandparents and you see they get along really, really well, there's something that connects them in ways that are just really powerful about that relationship, right? It's a kid who is born to innocence, and it's an older person who's informed by wisdom. And we screw it up in the whole middle is basically the problem, right? We're actually born with a lot of the right thinking about being vulnerable and asking questions and being curious and not being our ego getting in the way and all this other stuff. But then we go through, adulthood, and we screw that up until we learn, right? That maybe we had it right all along. When we were 9 years old, we had it together better than we've had it in the last 20, 30 years. And if we could actually think about it from the perspective of how much we can learn and gain from one another, recognizing that not anyone in any room knows everything, and that we all make mistakes and we all have our stuff. Think about, I've mentioned this to you many times too, people who actually even join business groups. I would say in about 75% of these groups, they have a harder time sharing business issues with one another than they have personal issues. And the reason is because they don't want to compromise their currency as a CEO or as an executive with everyone else in the room. So it still gets in the way, that ego thing, that inability to kind of just put something out there. And so oftentimes I'll run an inclusion exercise with groups, right? And I'll ask them, all right, talk to me about the biggest mistake you've ever made professionally. And it starts off with people sheepishly kind of admitting certain things. And the next thing it's like, you think that's bad? Let me tell you what I did, how I screwed up. And it starts going around the table, and now people start getting into a rhythm of it. And everyone looks at one another and recognizes, all right, we got it. And they can start at least engaging one another, right?
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, and that's probably a good point to segue to our next question. But please, Zed, Philip, Gordon, jump in here.
I was going to say, Gordon, maybe just a little bit on, what was the pull into YPO, and how was there a hesitation in, look, is this the right for me? Do I do it? Do I not do it? And what's been the kind of the sticky factor for you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was press ganged into it, so I had no choice.
That's good. That's nice.
It's curiosity. I mean, I'd never experienced anything like it. I mean, in Scotland and the UK, we've got very entrepreneurial ecosystems. I mean, Scotland's got Entrepreneurial Scotland, which is a great facility, but it doesn't do small groups of peer discussions, which was the curious thing for me.
Yeah.
And for me, I've been on a personal journey myself. I mean, I'm naturally a shy person. I'm very quiet. And what Patsy Rodenberg in her Second Circle book says is the first circle. I'm in that. So I try and get into the second circle and put more energy into it. And that for me was a big thing.
It's interesting what you've just said, because being press ganged into it, I was a forum leader for 15 years of 4 different groups. And how many times I would, in their own words, have members who were very tentative, almost reluctant, felt they needed to be here necessarily more than they wanted to be here. But then 2 meetings, 4 meetings, 6 meetings, 8 meetings, 10, 12 meetings later, they're going, oh my gosh, where have you been all my life? I didn't even know something like this existed. You guys and girls are already like family to me. I feel that I can, to some degree, progressively hang it all at the door. The thick skin, the armor, the ego. I can just come on in here and I can just be me. What do you think, Leo, to Gordon's point?
I think to Gordon's point, and I wanted to pick up on this, because if you're out there listening and you think that, everybody starts from a different place here, right? So Gordon talked about the fact that maybe by nature, he's more private and keeps things closer to the vest. That's okay. You're going to have other people who will tell their story to anyone who will listen. They'll be in an airplane or whatever, and they'll just—
some of whom are on this call.
That's right. And that's all good. That's all great. But I kind of think about it like when you have an environment that you will quickly recognize as being safe. It's not unlike when you go to a spa and you're there and you see this pool of water and the steam is gently rising off the top. If you immerse yourself in this pool, it's going to be the most restorative experience in the whole world. You don't have one of these at home, and yet there you are sitting there. In all likelihood, you may just dangle your feet in the water. You'll sit next to it and read a magazine. The point is that not that you have to, everyone is going to operate at the same level necessarily, but if you can recognize that the more that you are willing to share, the more that you see it as both an act of generosity and courage, and that there's a lot of people to benefit from that, you can help yourself just step just a little deeper into that pool at your own pace, and it's so to make it a little less scary, I think for folks, awesome. You can get used to that water.
I love that idea of just like dangling your feet in first, right? You don't have to dive in head first. You can just sort of dangle your feet in and feel the temperature and then progressively get in. So
exactly.
Let's segue to the next question. But yeah, Zed and Philip, I happen coincidentally to be on calls with both of you this morning, and I know that you both have some great perspectives on this. So come on in as the opportunity presents itself here. Yeah. And so, Leo, one thing that really caught my attention is you said something about developing the muscles. And so, when you're in an external peer forum experience, you can develop the muscles that you can then perhaps take back into your own organization. Now, you've studied the success factors of what makes for high-performing, we'll come to internal later, external peer forum experiences so that you're developing those muscles in the right way. Can you give us like a high-level flyover of what you've discovered?
Yeah, 2 things. One, and I'll address this idea of the muscles first, is when we learn in groups or when we learn in teams, we achieve both, or we can realize both intentional and collateral learning, right? So the intentional learning may come from maybe the speaker comes to my meeting, or I learn some things from my members and I might very intentionally take that content and do something with it. When we talk about collateral learning, it's what we learn from how we learn. So when we engage one another and really get into a deep conversations about challenges or opportunities or anything like that, this is where we learn how to be more present, listen more effectively, ask good questions. Again, suspend judgment, not jump to conclusions or make assumptions. As we do that, it not only helps us be a better group member over time, but helps us be a better leader back at our office, because almost subconsciously, we're now going to the office and we're taking those muscles and we're bringing them into the workplace. And quite frankly, so many CEOs have told me that as they have gotten better at that over time, now you've got a senior leadership team who starts modeling a lot of the same behaviors. The second piece of it, and what we found for high performing groups, was they had a powerful learning achieving cycle. So basically, that involved really that they learn, right? And because they share with one another, they learn better together when they do that, right? And when they do that, because they're not a book club, right? This is not just about people coming together and enjoying things, and understanding things more deeply. They actually give one another the confidence, the courage, and the encouragement to apply things that they've learned. And even if there's some trial and error, once they start achieving some positive results, then, and in fact, this has been recently added to the learning achieving cycle because it's so critically important, is they have to celebrate that win. They have to celebrate the fact that here they've done this, they've successfully put this forth in the company, and use that celebration to fuel that cycle, right? So when you get really good groups and they start bringing a lot of those skills into their teams, that's what starts to get flowing. And if you think about what the learning achieving cycle means in a team, if you think about the very best teams in sports, pick any sport you want, and they may not use this language specifically, but in practice, any team that is either winning championships or consistently in the playoffs doesn't regard winning the championship as the goal. They see it as the reward. The goal is, how do we get better every day? How do we do our learning, sharing, applying, achieving, celebrating? How do we go to practice today to make sure that we were better than we were yesterday, to set us up to be even better than that tomorrow? Their standards are high. Their attention to detail is incredible. And that's what puts them into place. They are about the process. They're about doing what it takes. That's their goal, is getting better. Championships are just the frosting, and great companies do the same thing. That's the very best companies.
Yeah.
Thanks. We take in Zaria's put a great comment in the chat. So do you want to come in, and then we'll go to Philippe?
Go ahead, Zed.
Mike's just hello everyone who doesn't know me. Yes. Do I need to say any more?
No, just keep dipping the toe. Just keep dipping the toe.
For our listeners,
I think
this goes out.
That may be a stereotypical position, but actually, I think it is remarkably. It's probably remarkably familiar to a lot of people who have come through sort of executive positions as I have. I'm now 21 at the end of my coming towards the end of my career, and I'm a liar. And the upshot has been that a kind of a dichotomy or an irony is that with ego has sometimes come a lack of confidence, and that lack of confidence has probably prevented me from exposing myself like I am now in a peer group. But I think it's been more a case of I wish someone, Gordon, had press gang me when they were joining YPO when they were young. When I was invited to join, I think it was Vistage many years ago, or one or other of these things, and you're busy and you don't want to do it, and you're like, oh well, no, and I've been through accelerators and I don't really want to go to another one, or something stops you doing it. Yep. And when I look back now at the problems that I could have resolved in a peer group and the stress I could have reduced by being part of a peer group,
I can't tell you, Zed, how you are hitting the nail on the top of the head. And Zed, in a moment, I would love you to verbalize what you've put in the chat, because we are putting this out as an audio podcast as well. So people won't be seeing what's in the chat. Even in the video, they won't see what's in the chat. So I'll ask you to verbalize it in a moment, just to sort of put a cherry on top of what you were saying. But I cannot say enough to repeat what you've just said. The number of times, Leo, that at the end of the first day of a brand new member coming to a group for the very first time, because perhaps in one way, shape or form, they were press ganged, Gordon, like you were, possibly by me, right?
Somebody threw him in the pool.
Right. Somebody threw him in the pool head first. And by the end of the day, they say something, Zed, in their own words, exactly like you just said. Number one, wow, I didn't know anything like this existed. Number two, I feel like I've known you folks for some time already, your soulmates. Number three, I have such regret that I didn't do this years, if not decades ago? Just put a cherry on top, Zed, and then we'll give it back to Leo to comment on all of that.
Yes. So Mike was exposing my peer group virginity. I think LinkedIn, numerous online communities, industry groups, university panels, etc. So all the things that I participate in are not peer-to-peer groups.
That's right.
And I've been to use Leo's analogy, I've been a spa dipper, dipper-inner, but no more. Now, however, where have you been? I really do feel the pain of past year's problems. Not having had the help of a peer-to-peer group was a mistake.
And we hear that a lot. People ask me all the time, ask Leo, ask Mark all the time, hey, this peer group thing, is this like a networking thing then? Is that what that is? Is this like a coaching thing then? Is this a consulting thing? Is this a training thing?
Is it a cult? Is it? My wife still thinks it's a cult.
And what they're trying to do is they're trying to impose a paradigm they understand on top of one they don't, which is why Leo had to write the book, to say, hey, everybody, stop doing that. There's actually a new paradigm, a new category of something that probably most of you have never experienced before. And until you do, like you're articulating, Zed, you probably won't fully understand it. Leo, do you want to weigh in on all of that?
You know, what's really interesting, we've talked a little bit about kind of, walking gently into the pool and all that, but I've also seen the converse of that, the recognition that because this is a safe environment, because I've seen people who just absolutely have no one else to talk to who can understand what it's like to sit in that CEO chair and be in the situation they're in. I went to a meeting in Canada about 4 years ago, and there was a gentleman, he was brand new to the group, and they said, hey, would you like to introduce yourself and everything? So he went off and he shared stuff that was going on in his life that just knocked the socks off of everybody in there. And everything from health to business to personal, it was all just like falling apart. Now, everyone was very respectful and, very empathetic in terms of how they listened. But in the back of their mind was like, holy moly, they were doing two things. A, any problems I've got going on in my life, I am good. Like, I will figure that out. But on the other hand, and then maybe they were thinking that, wow, this guy might need like a super group. Like, I don't even know, if we're, up for this in many respects. However, the reality was, and, I was able to follow up, years later, the difference that this group made in this man's life, because he finally had a place to go and talk about the kinds of things that he can't bring to his board of directors and maybe even can't bring to certain other audiences, right? And it became that incredibly powerful safe haven, for him. And, it was just extraordinary.
And it obviously, it is a bit of a cliche, everybody, isn't it? It's lonely at the top, right? That's a cliche, but it's real. I can't tell you the number of times, as Leo is saying, that members have said to me, in their own words, I really don't have anybody I can turn to safely and transparently and carefully, where I'm going to be given the time and space in which to immerse in a really challenging thing. I really don't have anywhere like that. Hey, Philip, you and I were chatting this morning and coincidentally, and you do a lot of work in large communities of entrepreneurs.
Yes.
And we ended up talking about the fact that there's a lot of things going on, but there probably isn't much going on at this depth of engagement. Could you weigh in here on that thought and any other thoughts that you've been having while we've been talking here?
Sure, I've been taking copious notes. Yeah, thank you, Leo. This has been really, really fantastic to listen to, and Mark will get a kick out of some of the notes I've taken. Yeah, no, I mean, I think so. So I lead Harvard Alumni Entrepreneurs, which is an organization of all of the alumni entrepreneurs from all of the Harvard schools. So we're the largest special interest group of alums in the universities, about 19,000 folks worldwide in 104 countries. So it's been a fantastic experience. very international outlook, and and part of the things that I've been working on over the past couple of years is leading their podcast, and then leading with a particular kind of I should say penchant towards engaging thought with the purpose of making people reflect, and again, to engage and not be talked at. The same thing in the webinars that a lot of the webinars that I lead, really helping to kind of have people share, and the feedback we get is fantastic from it, and both the engagement and also the membership has increased dramatically over the past 3 years, which has been really a fantastic thing to see. But so that's on the my volunteer side. Personally, and this is what Mark's going to get a kick out of because he doesn't even know this story, but about 15 years ago, I had a very successful business, and I just would, meeting with several other peers in different industries, and some, they weren't really friends, they were just acquaintances that I clicked with, and we would talk about different business issues and this and that. And finally we got to a point where we said, hey, let's put together, why don't we just formalize this? We all kind of, and we started a group, which, to be honest with you, it never clicked to me until during this call that this was relevant. No, seriously, that's how people archive. I do my sieve of brain archives things. So we started on a program, and for 3 years, we met once a month, and there were 6 of us, and went through the full experience of ups and downs. And it was 2000, and imagine 2007, it was right at, we were right at the peak of, success, and then roller coaster all the way through the financial crisis and everything. And the organization was called The Board. So fast forward 15 years, wonderful experience. Fast forward 15 years, and this time I'll point the finger at Mark. I was corralled into. I wasn't corralled.
We'll go with press ganged.
Press gang, exactly. Into joining the VAB tribe, which is virtual advisory boards. It's basically, I would say, and I won't do justice to it, the basis of it is YPO forum. Right. So with some different twist to it that's being discussed in terms of responsibilities of feedback, etc. But I did the first one, and after the first one, I just wasn't feeling the love. I was just kind of and I said to Mark, I said, I don't know about this. I got to be honest with you. And he said, just stick with it a little bit. Just go with it. Push yourself a little bit. And it was the best advice that I could have gotten, because I went back the second time, really, and to your story, Leo, about someone who shared a very personal experience. That's exactly what happened on the second session, which was incredibly powerful, incredibly moving, and it shifted the entire psyche of everyone. Yeah. And so we finished 3 so far, and it has been really, really fantastic.
Awesome. So, thank you.
Yeah. That's a
Thank
great
you so
share.
much. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And we'll start to think about landing this plane here in a few minutes. But before we do so, Leo, let me finish off with a final question for you. And oh boy, thank you so much for being here. We will make sure that we get Leo back, everybody, because we barely scratched the surface of the depth and breadth of a rich conversation that can unfold with Leo. He's done so much work in this space, written 3 books. He by and large, he is the guy of the peer group category who is the thought leader. But Leo, you've worked with, in some way, shape, or form, you've studied, you've researched, you've worked with, in many cases, peer group organizations all over the landscape. of course, Vistage, EO, YPO, you've studied, REF, of course.
Sure.
You're increasingly associated with us in REF and helping us do great work. I mean, what is it that gets your attention about REF and our direction and what we're trying to do in the future?
I like that you're really looking not at what's been, but what's next. You know, I really feel that from a technology standpoint, in terms of how to really bring people together and how to connect them in a meaningful way, you know, as Philip said, this is not a spectator sport. You've got to be involved. And I think for a lot of our audience too, who this may not be obvious, even though we live in this space, so it is to us, but the reason these environments are so safe is that confidentiality is sacrosanct. I mean, it is so important and such an important tenet of these groups that they operate in that way. But when I think about what REF is doing, where I think we're about to much more profoundly be at this intersection of artificial intelligence and collective intelligence, and how we are able to, you know, marry those two, you know, ideas to change the way that we work, to change the human contribution in the workplace, to alter how we engage one another, I think is really powerful. So I'm, you know, really watchful of what REF is doing right now.
Yeah, and it really speaks everybody to sort of how we're trying to be different and on the leading edge of what's next. We talked earlier about why are we having people having to make a false choice between this or that when they can make a real choice of this and that. So that's very much the middle ground that we occupy, number one. Number two, in a much more holistic way, perhaps, than you get anywhere else. I had to work so hard to make my peer group experiences as holistic as I wanted them to be, business, professional, personal, life. And not least of all in a third dimension that Leo has just begun to touch upon, which we're really excited about, which is this whole thing of collective intelligence. Now, you know, could any networking group, any coach, consultant, trainer, any peer group of any kind, could they claim to be in the business of collective intelligence? Of course they could, you know, to level 1 or level 2, but not level 5, as it were. And we won't unpack that today, but, you know, getting to a level 5 of collective intelligence doesn't happen by accident. It happens by design, through methodology, through process, through structure, and how do you navigate that and facilitate that? And of course, most importantly, not just in the meetings, what's happening outside of the meetings, outside of the forum, locally, regionally, nationally, internationally, globally. How do you tap into collective intelligence to be sort of a halo effect in the room with you? When you are in your local group, maybe physically or virtually, you're feeling the presence of that global collective intelligence in the room with you. That is the trail that we are beginning to blaze. Mark, final thoughts, final questions, final comments, and we'll see if there's
just a really quick shared experience. Like I remember it just, you know, when you were talking earlier on, I remember my first forum. I mean, just even hearing kind of like Philippe share his story when I had my first YPO forum, I was given the task of like hosting an event in Prague with 10 different people from 10 different countries who had never met. And we had an amazing moderator who like chaired this first session. And I remember this like big Israeli guy who was in the group saying, I'm not going to fucking share a thing. Like I'm not talking. Like 2 hours later, we were all in tears, you know, it's just like, you know, hugging each, like Philippe kind of indicated. And Gordon knows that, look, like the depth you can get to in a really like structured session with a professional moderator is like unbelievable. So we were just blown away. We were first time YPOers, first forum experience, first moderator. And we were all like, yeah, whatever. Like, we're just not, nobody's going to share it, you know? And then like I said, 2 hours, like, oh, I love you. It's just
and we'll
profound experience, you know. And we're still together, like as a forum.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Yeah. We'll try to bleep out that little soundbite back there, but that's awesome. And from our audience here, our participants, thanks so much for being here today. Any final thoughts, questions, comments? Any of you want to throw on the fire here? Well, thanks so much,
Mike.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Leo. Thanks,
Andrew.
Nice to meet you,
Andrew,
Ed. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks,
Andrew.
Philippe. Thanks,
Andrew, did I see you raise your hand?
He's still trying to calculate. He's still trying to calculate that number.
Yeah, I finally got to that number. It's 3. I hope this is not too profound. These organizations are so important because, the world really does need proper, decent leaders. I mean, it's very depressing looking around at our world and political leaders and just how poor most of them are. And so we have to help ourselves in the sense, particularly from the business side, and hopefully over time those people will actually go into the political world and actually lead countries and lead societies in a different way. And that's why all of these things that we do here with these different peer-to-peer organizations, no one is better than the other. They're all individual choice, but we need them, and we need to procreate them even further, so more and more people have them.
And that is profound, and we couldn't agree more with that. We really believe that business needs to be a force for good in the world, and that's very much our focus. And so there we have it, everybody. That was episode number 1 of the Peering Podcast. Thank you so much for everybody being here and joining in our conversation. In particular, of course, thank you so much to you, Leo Bottary. You really just are a world-leading thinker about the whole peer power and peer innovation space. We'll get you back to talk more about peer innovation next time. Thank you, Mark, for being such a wonderful co-host as
you
ever.
You can put world leading into my bit as well, Mike. Not just for Leo.
Yeah, you're a world leading co-host. That's it. And so
thank you.
Come on back, everybody, to future episodes of the Peering Podcast. We'll see you there. Thanks for being here.
Cheers, guys.
Right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.